Hey guys, so I wanted to make a review of Nioh. I want to make different types of reviews. This is a casual review, so I'm very casual with the games I play. I'm not someone who takes something super seriously, who's like min-maxing. Well, I do min-max a little, but who's like, who knows everything about the game, like the back of their hand, who knows how every single weapon works, every single like frame, like the frame data, where to position themselves with every enemy, stuff like that. But I don't feel comfortable calling myself a casual for the game because, like Nioh, I have like 120 hours and I pretty much know a lot about how to fight the enemies. So I can't really call myself a casual, but I do play casually. Now, as for a casuals review, which is another type of review I want to make it so that it's a game where I am a casual. Like, I don't really play that much, and if I do, even if I am decent at it, I don't really know everything about it. I'm just kind of messing around and having fun. So for this review, or all of these reviews, I'm going to kind of give the rating first, and then give an explanation of the game, and then explain why I gave the rating I did. For Nioh, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. I liked it, but I thought it had a few issues, but it wasn't a bad game. I'd consider a 7.5 good. I know 7 is kind of considered like average. In my opinion, I'd say like 6 is average. That's the way I see it. And like 7 to like 7.5 is kind of like good. 8 would be great. 9 would be fun, like really fun. But so on and so forth. So I started playing Nioh because I wanted to get into Souls-likes. And I know a lot of people who play Nioh are going to start whining about that, which is like, I'll get to that when I talk about my opinions. But I had heard about Nioh and I knew about like it's kind of based on Japanese like folklore, so that's why I wanted to play it. And being completely honest, I was actually gonna refund the game when I first played it, but I actually didn't know that the cap for refunding a game was having it for 2 weeks. I thought it was a month, so I wasn't able to refund it, and I kept playing. But I'm kind of glad that I wasn't able to refund it because I did have fun with it, and I think it really pushed me more towards trying out different types of games. Now, for an explanation for the actual game, the story is very simple but serviceable. Personally, for games that are gameplay heavy, I kind of like it that way. Kind of just want to get in with the action. And I think it's also especially because William, that's the main character, isn't like a silent protagonist, but he doesn't really talk when you're in game. He only talks during like cutscenes. So when it comes to games like that, I feel like there's just this impulse to just play. You kind of don't want to take too much time with like the story. I don't think there's anything wrong if there's a story, but I feel like it kind of has to weave its way into the game as well, the gameplay. But the story is very simple. Basically, main character William wants to save his guardian spirit from an alchemist named Edward. Edward kidnaps his guardian spirit, who's called, now I'm not really sure exactly how you pronounce it. I think I've heard it before, but I kind of forgot. I think it's Sarse? I don't know. It's supposed to be, I think, Celtic. But anyways, Edward kidnaps her, and then he goes to Japan. In Japan, there's like yokai, which are supernatural beings, and there's special like magical stones called Amrita that Edward wants to collect. And it's basically just Edward going around like the country or something, leaving enemies for William to fight. There's not really too much in between. I mean, you meet some characters, you fight new people, but there's not too much that happens. It's just really just going to one area fighting, going to another, so on and so forth. But eventually he gets to Edward. Oh yeah, spoiler warning. When I make these reviews, I am gonna just be talking about stuff that happens. I forgot to say that at the very beginning, but I'll try to remember. William eventually gets to Edward and kills him and gets Darcy back. That's kind of it. There are DLCs, but I only played the first two. Honestly, from my perspective, there was barely any addition to the story. They just kind of introduced new characters. That was kind of it. I'm pretty sure all the DLCs are connected. They're like one arc, but I didn't finish the last one, and I'll get to why. That was for the lore. So I already explained how Japan is a land that has like the Amrita, the magic stones, and people want to use them to fight wars because I think they like grant powers or whatever. It's kind of weird. Like they explain that they want to use them for power, but I feel like I never really see them use them for power. Only like certain people use them, but it's like rare almost. Anyways, Japan is also a land that has a bunch of yokai, which of course, as explained, are supernatural beings like spirits or demons. And then the guardian spirits actually give people kind of a boost or some special ability. William's spirit, Sarse, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, basically allows them to come back to life. So it kind of explains the revive mechanic and the whole like leaving your soul in an area and having to collect it again. One thing I will say about the spirits is that I'm a little confused on who can see the spirits, because it's been a while since I kind of spent a long time in the game and I don't particularly remember everything, but I'm pretty sure they said how William is a special case who can see the spirits and not everyone can do that. But it's kind of odd because in the game people use abilities from the spirits but they don't really acknowledge them, so I'm a little confused on how that worked. I'm sure there's probably an explanation in game, but I probably didn't come across it. Now as for the gameplay, there's 7 weapons, or 7 weapon types. The sword, dual swords, spear, axe, kusarigama, odachi, and tonfa. There's 3 stances, so there's a low stance, which is like fast but weak. There's a mid stance, which is balanced, and then the high stance, which is slow attacks but really strong. They deal a lot of damage. Different stances have different attacks tied to them, so like for example the sword, when you're doing low stance it'll have a certain move set. It kind of sticks to the ground sometimes for some of the weapons. Then for mid it'll have another different move set, different slashes. Obviously you have, I forgot to mention, there's the light and heavy attacks. Both of those are going to have different combo strings per stance. And then high stance, usually for the high stance, like the heavy attack is just one attack that just kind of slams against the enemy. Then you can unlock skills. There's like skill trees to expand those combos or have different moves that cause different effects on enemies. Enemies actually have stamina. In Nioh, the stamina is called ki. So when you attack the enemies, you can actually stagger them once their ki is depleted. Well, that's for human enemies, because there are 2 different types of enemies. There's humans and yokai. For human enemies, you can stagger them, but for yokai, you can like stun lock them. There are different ways in which you have to deal with human and yokai enemies. They act very differently. Certain attacks work differently on them. For example, human enemies, they block a lot, but they're very slow. They're very weak. As for yokai, they don't block, but they kind of just tank through your attacks. So that's why when you deplete their ki, you're able to stun lock them so they can't tank through them. Then as for the stats, it's kind of, well, obviously Souls like have the stat system. It has obviously the normal stats like a stat that gives you life, one that gives you stamina or the ki, and then certain stats are tied to weapon damage. For example, if you increase your ki stat, it also increases your spear damage, and also you need certain level of stats to unlock certain abilities for the weapons. The weapons can have different abilities. A sword can have like break damage, which is how much ki damage you deal to a blocking enemy, and like there's different types of stats that they can have. You can have like life drain, stuff like that. In the game there's also magic and ninja equipment. You can enhance your weapons with elemental damage, or you can shoot spells, slow down an enemy, throw projectiles. And then for ninja, there's like ninja scrolls that are kind of the same, where you cause some kind of status effect on yourself. You can like dash faster, you can become like invisible. There's ninja equipment, so like kunai, shuriken. Something that is very important to Nioh is the ki pulse. It is a game mechanic where once you execute an attack, there will be like particles that surround William, and if you press the ki pulse button at the right moment, you'll regain the stamina you used for your last attack. It's completely essential. Oh, also it immediately starts your ki regen, so it is an essential mechanic that you need to learn to actually succeed in Nioh. Now, something I need to explain is that while Nioh is a Souls-like, Nioh is very different. You cannot go into Nioh with the mindset of a Souls-like. Dodging is not really a mechanic that you'll use to like avoid enemy attacks very often, because dodging doesn't have that many iframes. You have to be very precise if you want to dodge the attacks. There are different types of dodgings that are actually attached to the stances. Like low stance has kind of a normal dash, but then on top of that, some weapons can have like a sidestep, and then the high stance does have like a roll, but it's not like the Souls roll. However, like guarding is a good option. If you guard too much, you will be staggered, which is pretty much a death sentence, but it is an option. Also, Nioh has a mechanic where if you get hit, and you hold the block button, after like the first hit, you will block the rest of the hits. So it's not like once you get hit once, you're just gonna get stunned and killed. You can't really approach Nioh with the same mindset as a Souls-like. I feel like for the gameplay, Nioh to me feels like you're kind of solving a problem. Like you have to look at the enemies and try to understand how you're going to defeat them. You can't deal with every situation the same way. And obviously Souls also has a similar aspect where you can't deal with everything the same way. But for Nioh, there's a certain like management of like key, what sort of abilities you use. It does have the retrieving your souls type of mechanic where if you die, you leave your like soul. I don't know exactly what you want to call it. Now when it comes to the weapons in Nioh, it's not really like a Souls game where you have certain weapons that you can use and just throughout the game you keep those weapons. It is kind of like a looter. I feel like if you had to give Nioh defining tags, it would be kind of like a Souls-like looter because you will find a lot of weapons. When I mentioned the weapon types, every single weapon within those types acts the same. So if you find a sword, 2 different swords will have the exact same moveset, exact same speed, everything the same, just different stats. They look different visually, but they work the same way. And you'll get different rarities for the weapons. The higher the rarity, the more stats you can have. And on top of that, they have something called proficiency. So the more you use a weapon, it kind of like levels up essentially. There's only a certain amount of levels. So if you have like a common weapon, you can only level it up once. And they're not called like this, common, uncommon, rare, stuff like that. They have different names. But if you find like an uncommon weapon, you can level it up 2 times. But you will find a lot of duplicates of weapons. You can either sell those weapons or dismantle them or donate them, but overall you're going to have to manage your inventory a lot. There's also a similar aspect with the armor. There's different armors. I wouldn't say that they will work the same. Obviously there's like helmets, gauntlets, body armor, legs, and they kind of work the same, but they just have different stats. And there are like set bonuses, but there's not too much to be said about the armor. There is a blacksmith system where you go and you can sell stuff. You can dismantle your weapons to get the materials for them, forge weapons. And there's a soul match system because there's also levels to the weapons. This is apart from the proficiency. I know I called the proficiency sort of levels, but it's not the same. So when you start the game, you'll probably find like level 1 to like level 3 weapons. And then by the end of the game, you'll be getting like level 150. The max level weapons. When you soul match a weapon, you can bring it up a level, but you have to sacrifice another weapon for it. I wouldn't recommend using the soul match. I feel like because of the amount of weapons that drop, you're eventually going to find the weapon you like at a higher level. Now, on to my actual opinion of the game. Also, this is my first video in this format, so if this just feels like a jumbled mess, it's because it is. I have no idea what I'm doing, but with practice, I'll probably format it better. I don't want to sound like I'm being harsh with the game. Like there is a lot that I liked about it, but I did feel like it was kind of unpolished. And there were instances where I just felt, I wouldn't say that it's unfair. It definitely feels like with some instances, you have to play a very specific way to win. When it comes to the story, I liked it. There wasn't, again, it was simple but serviceable. There wasn't really anything I have to say against it. I think the only thing that I had against the story was there were a lot of characters, but I felt like they didn't really matter. I never really cared about any of them. A lot of them didn't do anything. So it's kind of like there's a lot of characters, but I don't really care. I do think apparently the characters are based off real characters, like they're real people. So that could kind of explain why there's so many characters. But yeah, there's like only a very few characters that actually matter and actually do anything in the story. I really liked the actual like lore, I guess you could say, about the world, how the world works with the like yokai, the guardian spirits. I was a big fan of the style of the enemies, the yokai at least, not the human enemies. I like how they translated Japanese folklore into the game. And to be honest, there were certain enemy types that I might have liked a little bit more than the others. But overall, I think the way the enemies looked was very nice. Now, as for the gameplay, I tried using every single weapon. I tried to, make them all work. I think every single one of them is usable, in my opinion, except for the axe. Like, the axe is it's kind of clunky. I've heard a few people describe it as just, the thing you want to use if you just want to whack enemies and do a lot of damage, which is true. But even if you're doing that, it's quite slow. So it's kind of difficult to do that. And on top of that, if you're using the low stance, it doesn't feel very effective. I feel like the axe is the only weapon that I didn't really like. Every single weapon is very unique in their own way, and I think they all do what they do well. The sword is supposed to be like balanced. It's kind of good at everything, but it doesn't have a lot of reach. However, I did really like the sword because it has a parry mechanic. The parry mechanics only really work on human enemies, but it was really fun to use. As for the dual swords, I feel like the dual swords are kind of like flashy. They're really fast. You kind of see a lot of like damage numbers because you're hitting a lot of times. But overall, they're just kind of like fast and low damage. I felt like the combo strings for the stances were kind of weird, like especially the high one. It kind of didn't feel like it hit hard enough for me to care about using them long term, but they were nice. The spear, it's obviously a very long range weapon. It's actually quite efficient, like it's really good. You can poke enemies, and it's really good to use just for long range attacks. But personally, I just didn't think it was a very fun weapon to use. I don't think it's a bad weapon. I just didn't like using the moveset. For the Kusarigama, I thought it was a very interesting weapon. The attacks tied to the stances are more situational rather than based on the stance you're using. For example, for the high stance, the Kusarigama is like essentially like a scythe with a weight and a chain attaching them. For the high stance, your heavy attack is you throwing the weight. It's kind of like a long range attack. The mid stance, for your light attack, you're throwing the chain around in like a circle. It's kind of like for crowd control. Your high stance, light, and I think it's the low stance, light as well, are very similar. You're just kind of spinning the weight around. Your mid stance, heavy, is kind of like a lunge with the scythe and then onto a combo, so on and so forth. Like, it feels very situational. It's a very interesting weapon. I think it is fun, but you definitely have to learn it very well. I didn't really use it that much, but I really wish I could probably use it more because it's definitely very interesting. As for the Odachi, it's kind of like the sword, but just longer. I guess you'd consider like a heavy weapon, but it's a very interesting heavy weapon because it doesn't really act like a heavy weapon, as in like it is slower, but it's not slow. Like it's definitely, you can definitely use it at a fast enough pace to deal with enemies. Honestly, from my experience, I kind of felt like the Odachi was kind of OP. Like, it has long reach, you can hit multiple enemies with it, it's very strong, and while it is slower than other weapons, it's definitely not a slow weapon, so you can keep up with a lot of enemies. It's a really crazy weapon. I feel like any beginner who doesn't really know what to use should definitely stick to the Odachi. I'm not saying it's like some easy weapon to use where you just use it and just destroy enemies. Like, you definitely have to learn it and learn how to use every single attack, but it's a really good weapon. That's my point. The last weapon type is the Tonfa. I like the Tonfa, but it just didn't feel like it hit very hard sometimes, and on top of that, the reach was very close. There were a few attacks that had a bit of a long reach. To be fair, I didn't really use it too much. However, I feel like I definitely would have a higher opinion of it if I had actually tried using it more, because I mentioned how I liked the parry from the sword, and the Tonfa has like a parry as well, but the parry is for every enemy. I never learned how to use it, and once I actually stopped playing the game and started looking more into the parries, I realized that I really like the Tonfa's parry, but by then I just didn't really use it. It is a fun weapon. I feel like what I said by it doesn't really hit hard is more on the low stance. I don't know why, I just felt like the low stance, I never really wanted to use it. I stuck more to high and mid. Now, as for the environments of the game, I felt like Nioh had a very boring environment. Like, there were some levels that looked nice, but most of the environments just looked so gray. Like, they had a lot of gray tones to them, or everything just kind of melded together. I didn't really like it. I don't think environments are like the biggest thing about video games, but I do think if a game doesn't have a lot of good environments, I kind of just zone out. I don't really care too much. Personally, I think an art direction is the most important thing when it comes to like the visuals of a game. I would describe the environments for Nioh kind of like the story. They're very simple, but they're serviceable. I mean, I don't need to have crazy environments, but it would have been nice if Nioh had a lot better levels. Now, I'll be honest about the gameplay. I don't want to say that it wasn't fun, but I feel like it just didn't feel satisfying. I think it's more like the sound and the way it looks. It kind of feels like you're just dealing damage. I feel like with other games, when you hit an enemy, it just feels nice, you know? And with Nioh, it doesn't really. That doesn't mean that it's not fun. I just feel like I want more out of it, and that is one thing that I didn't like a lot, but I don't think that's like something super important. Something that I really was not happy about was the human bosses. I feel like the human bosses are just so annoying because essentially they get like a boost where they use their guardian spirit to like get an elemental spell on their weapon. But the thing is, I mentioned how human enemies, well, I didn't really say they can be staggered, but they block a lot, and when you attack them and they're not blocking, they get like stun locked. They react to your attacks. However, the human enemies, when they get a boost, they just tank through your attacks. They're like yokai, but the problem with them is they're very aggressive. They don't stop attacking you, and they're just incredibly annoying to deal with. Like, I know there's gonna be people who say like, oh, you know, just use spells, or you have to use very specific ways to like lower their ki, but I'm just like, I don't really want to do that. Like, I don't want to just spend every single boss fight, human boss fight, just just slowing them down, going, hitting them with a very specific attack to lower their ki. Once their ki is down, punish them, and so on and so forth. Which I know saying it out loud like that makes it sound like, just simple gameplay mechanics. I feel like once you play it, it's like a thing where I'm like, it just doesn't feel satisfying. Like I guess you could say it's a patience thing. Like I can be very patient because I like parrying, you have to be kind of patient to parry. But I just feel like you have to play a very specific way with them. You can't really just attack them in different ways, which I didn't really like. I feel like you should be able to approach the same situation with any different way, and like sure, a very specific method might be more effective, but you should be able to do it in different ways and still succeed. With Nioh, it feels like you kind of have to go to each encounter with a certain mindset, which I didn't really like. I think the yokai bosses were very fun, most of them. There were a few of them that were just annoying. I think the progression of the bosses was really neat. The first boss, well, in my opinion, is very interesting because it's a very difficult boss for a first level. I feel like people, when they get into the game, they probably have no idea what they're doing or how to play the game, and the boss just destroys you. I have no idea how long I played the first level for. I fought the boss so many times, but it's definitely not a bad boss. I feel like it definitely forces you to learn the mechanics, and then the rest of the bosses are fairly easy. I would say there's two bosses which are kind of a gimmick fight. You have to fight them in very specific ways, and to be honest, they were very annoying. I did not like them. But yeah, bosses, they were challenging, they were fun, except for the human bosses. I did not like the human bosses. And something I do want to address, now this doesn't really affect my opinion of the game, but the community is like 50% of the community's entire personality is that Nioh is not a Souls-like, which is like, yeah, sure, like, yeah, obviously, if you play the game, you know it isn't. But they make everything about how it's not the same as a FromSoft game. And it's like, it's one of those situations where I feel like you hear more people complaining about people comparing the game to a FromSoft game than you see people comparing it to a FromSoft game. Like, obviously, as a Souls-like, you're gonna compare it to it. I actually didn't beat the game, as I mentioned. The reason for that was, I'm pretty sure it was the end of the second DLC. The final boss is a human enemy who immediately boosts himself with his guardian spirit and has a bunch of blitz attacks, is super fast, very aggressive. And I think I got through 5 attempts with him where I barely did any damage, and I just went, I don't see why I'm doing this. I'm not gonna gain anything from this. I don't think it's fun. I'm not even gonna bother. And I just quit the game and started playing Nioh 2. I know it's not like I'm sure it's not like the most difficult boss where everybody else probably learned its I could have learned its attack patterns and whatnot. I just didn't see why I should. I didn't really feel the motivation to beat it and keep going. I just didn't care at that point. And I stopped playing because also on top of that, the DLCs just didn't add too much to the story. I didn't care too much about finishing them. That's pretty much it for my opinions. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious as this was an extremely scuffed review. Honestly, it's actually been a while since I played Nioh 2. I mean, Nioh, since I'm playing Nioh 2 right now. So I feel like not a lot of the game is fresh on my memory. There's probably a lot that I forgot to mention. It was a fun game, but I just really didn't care too much about getting deep into it. And I know maybe a lot of people might hear this and think that I'm being like negative, saying not to play it or something, which is not it at all. Like I 100% recommend people who like Souls-like to try it out, but just go into it with a different mindset. It's definitely a very fun game. Honestly, I feel like it's just not really my type of game. If I finish Nioh 2, I'll make a review for that too, but I'm really someone who just likes parrying a lot. I just felt more satisfied in the game parrying. Like literally the end of Nioh was just me parrying as much as I could, more than I should have. Like there was so many areas where I probably could have gotten through them faster if I just attacked normally, but I insisted on parrying. I just feel like the gameplay is not 100% for me. Nioh 2 definitely improves a lot of the gameplay, which I'm liking a lot. Yeah, when I first started playing the game, it was probably like a 7 for me, but once I finished it, I definitely gave it the 0.5 overall. I think it's a good game, and this was not a good review, to be honest. I have no idea what I'm saying. I'm literally just rambling and I made a script, or tried. It was more like an outline, and I literally started adding things in as I was talking because I forgot to say certain things. I hope this doesn't really represent any future reviews I make will be like, because honestly, I was gonna make this review a long time ago, but I just completely procrastinated it, and now I made it. I'm suffering the consequences by making a really crappy review. I hope this was a decent take on Nioh, or a decent review on Nioh. If you're a fan and I made you upset, I'm really sorry, but otherwise, thank you for watching. I hope you will stick with me as I improve my video making skills, my speaking, or I don't know if you want to say review making or commentary skills. Thank you so much, and goodbye.